Hello and welcome everybody. My name's Tim Graham of hotspotting.com.au and I'm delighted to be joined by my special guest for today's episode, Marion Mays. Marion's the founder of Money Strong. She's a certified money coach and she's dedicated the past decade towards helping women with their financial literacy and wellness. Marion, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Tim.
I'm really excited to have you here. We've obviously worked together for over a decade now, but it's nice to be in this sort of environment where we can have a bit of a chat and obviously for our listeners get a bit of an understanding of your property journey.
Yeah, totally. I'm looking forward to it.
That's all right. So our topic for today is what separates the 1% of Australian properties investors that have maybe 5 or 6 investment properties or more from the vast majority of Australians that struggle to get past investment property number 1. But before we get to that, talking about your personal property journey, let's start there. So, what's the story of Marion Mays?
It's a long story, but I'm going to be succinct for the purposes of this. So, I'm now 53 years old and I started my property journey in my early 20s. And actually the first property that I ever bought, which is not usually someone's first property, was a commercial property in Collins Street, Melbourne. Yeah. And a good mate of mine at the time said, do you want to catch up for coffee on Collins Street? And we did. And then they were like, do you want to come and have a look at this thing up here that I'm looking at? And we did. And then they said, do you want to buy this together? And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, sure. Okay. That was a really cool experience for me because I don't think I would have had the confidence, obviously in my early 20s, in my own right to buy my first commercial property, but buying it with a co-buyer because I couldn't buy it alone was, I don't know, it just gave me the security or the peace of mind to be able to do that. I don't think I would have been able to do that in my own right. So that was my first footway into property investment.
Okay. So you don't own that property anymore?
I don't own that property anymore. Actually, after I bought that commercial property, I bought another commercial property with the same person again. So I was like, well, this worked. It was really simple. You get half of the money, I'll get half of the money. Let's buy it together. So we bought another commercial property in the same building. And so I had 2 commercial properties in my portfolio. And then my third property was actually a beautiful old heritage listed property in Hawthorne called Elizabeth's Cottage. And I was driving down the road and I saw a sign, because I was a big property mogul now because I bought 2 commercial properties with a mate. Yeah. I saw a sign on the fence and it was just like a handwritten sign for sale. And I pulled up and I knocked on the door and I thought, I could get a good deal here. And anyway, we ended up buying that property as our third joint property. And so now I had 3 properties, well on my way to being a property mogul.
Okay. And then what happened? Because your story does take a turn, which most people, they say life happens as you're planning it. But what's interesting about your journey in property is that I think what transpired throughout the last couple of decades is really what's inspiring you today to do the type of work that you're doing.
Yeah, totally. So without making you live through every single property acquisition that I purchased, but I purchased quite a few. And I developed a little bit of an infatuation with Art Deco and heritage listed, like really old solid properties. And so I accumulated a portfolio of properties. And I don't think I actually bought my first home that I lived in per se as my full-time home for another decade after I started investing property. Yeah, so right. I was essentially rent vesting.
You were rent vesting before rent vesting was a term.
Yeah, I was doing it before it was a thing. So I was essentially rent vesting for well on a decade. And it wasn't until I was, I think, in my mid-30s that I bought my first property to actually reside and live in.
So let's circle back to when you first bought the commercial property. How old were you then?
25.
Yeah, wow, okay. Yeah. And then you accumulated a couple of properties by the time you bought your first owner-occupier.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But all rent vesting. So, rental income's coming in and, I was doing whatever you do when you're 20, like getting my salary, having a good time, living life. Yeah, so in my mid-30s, I bought a property and I actually moved into that property, which was in St Kilda in Melbourne, Victoria, for those people listening who are not from Melbourne. And then, yes, as you said, life took a turn. And actually, a couple of years later, I found myself in a situation where I now had a child. So I had a young son, and then I went through, in a really short period of time after having my son, a separation. And I think this is of noteworthy because when I left, my son was 7 months old. I left with my son, just to clarify.
Yes.
And I remember at that time that I had tenants in my property and I couldn't just kick them out and move into my property. And in the same building that I owned a property, there was an apartment up for Airbnb. And that was kind of really vulnerable to need to leave my family home and go into an Airbnb situation. And I remember thinking, it's just lucky, or maybe not lucky, planning, that I actually have an apartment that in 90 days or 60 days in this same building that I can move into.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, what would it be like? I would never, I think back to that time and I think if I didn't own real estate and I didn't have a safe roof over my head, because, it becomes about the child, not yourself, would I have left? And that question always plays out for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Idea of leaving your family home to go to a shelter, or, I mean, you can't sustain an Airbnb long term financially. So I think that was a really pivotal moment when I realized that all of the investing that I'd done in the earlier years held me in
Now
good
gave you
stead.
options.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could make a choice that maybe many people listening wish they could probably make right now, but can't.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so you've separated from your partner at the time, and you and Somerset have got yourself on your feet by this stage, or?
Yeah, well, Somerset and I are living now back in the property that I bought and was my home that I lived in before I became pregnant. And unfortunately for us, but not uncommon, our separation circumstances and our custody situation ended up going into the family court arena. That's not that uncommon, but certainly the period of time that we spent in the family court is probably uncommon.
Yeah.
So actually what happened from there, it was all a lot, to be honest with you. I was a new single mum. Somerset was born preemie. He weighed 1 kilo. So I think you're a father, Tim.
Yeah.
And I always
2.8
say,
we were.
think about 2 blocks of butter.
Yeah.
That was him, two 500-gram blocks of butter. And, I used to wash him in a salad bowl. So, so I was doing all of that. I'd left, I was living on my own with my son. And then within a month or two after I left, litigation began. And so I was trying to juggle that. And Somerset actually developed a tumor after he was born behind his left eye and had to have surgery and then ongoing treatment. So there was all of that in the mix.
Yeah.
And then came family court, and then my life forever changed as I knew it. And I think for anyone listening, it's really hard for me to articulate what the experience is like, but I think the best that I can do is to say, imagine an experience where it's compulsory for you to participate, whether you want to or not. You have to pay tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for the privilege of participating, even though you don't want to. And that other people have 100% control over your life.
Yeah.
And
we're
these
not
other
talking just about finances now. We're talking about a human being and, your own child.
Correct. But also the financial strain of that. And again, if I didn't have this property that I was living in, and actually what happened for me is that I didn't work for the first 7 years of Somerset's life, given what I've just shared with you. He was born prem. He had some health challenges. He had some developmental challenges. But also I was pretty much in court. I think we worked out, I was in a court appearance every 30 to 60 days. Like that was my full-time occupation as well as caring for my son. So I literally didn't have paid employment for that period of time. And then people say, well, how is that possible? What I did have was assets, and I had assets that had equity in them. And I was able to use, and for those people listening who don't know what equity means, I had available funds that I could redraw from my loans on my properties. And I literally lived off the available funds from my properties for that 7-year period. I had to sell down. So the obvious choice was I would sell one of the commercial properties to the person I'd purchased it with, just sell my share. Then that gave me cash flow to sustain myself for a couple of years, and so on and so on. And very unfortunate for myself and for Somerset and also his father. We spent 15 years in the family court, and in fact in multiple courts. And
Well, that's got to be close to a record, doesn't it?
I think so. Our case went to the full court of the family court, and just to give you perspective, 0.01% of cases ever go there. But I think the point is that to financially sustain oneself whilst you're spending, I mean, barristers and lawyers cost a lot of money, let's just put it this way. And the family law courts are a $15 billion industry in Australia for a reason. So, but if not for the properties that I had, I honestly don't know what the outcome would have been, because I actually believe my ability to participate in the family court was because I had access to money.
Yeah.
And therefore my ability to keep custody of my son was detrimental to the fact that I had money and I could fund lawyers and I had a roof over my head. And I think for anyone listening, I just keep saying that, you know, property may seem like it's just an asset, like it's just bricks and mortar. But as you can see in this story, as it unfolds, first of all, it was a safe refuge for me to take, because if I had to leave and go to a women's shelter, I could do that probably to myself. But I don't know how I would feel about taking my son out of a beautiful home on a beachfront location into a women's shelter. Financially, because I had property, I was able to not work and care for my son, which he needed at that time. Then I was able to reluctantly, not by choice, participate in family court proceedings and sustain myself as a woman financially and have really good legal representation for a period of 15 years. There's no way without, it's just factually without the properties that I had and the ability, and I had to liquidate some of the properties, obviously. Money didn't come out of thin air. It got to the point where I had to liquidate a number of the properties so that I could keep paying lawyers and barristers and keep, you know, representing myself in court. But I'm here today to tell the story. I was successful.
Well, it's a story that, you know, for a lot of people, you know, especially who we attract at Hotspotting, a lot of the time it's a wealth vehicle. People are thinking about property investment as growing wealth. And of course it is, but it's the flip side of when things don't go well, that it gives you that support and it gives you options, as we've mentioned already today. But, you know, it's a horrible thought to think what happens or what would have happened had you have not had those things.
Well, I watched many women and, well, many parents navigate the family court, and I watched many parents lose custody of their children, not because they were bad parents, but they didn't have the financial means to sustain themselves in the family court system. So that's just unfortunately a harsh reality. And just speaking to what you said about, you know, having property being a support or being a safety backup plan, I mean, really, the reality is, you know, 1 in 2 people in Australia do go through a divorce, and then assets do have to be split, and then people do have to start again. And we can only start again with what we've built. And yes, I see property absolutely as a solid investment, and I'm, you know, property centric fanatic. But I also see it as a safety backup plan. I see it as risk mitigation. I see it as a smart move. I see it as, particularly for women, you know, if you want to have autonomy and independence as a woman, then having, you know, you've heard me say it before, every woman should own one little black dress in their wardrobe and one piece of real estate in their own name. And as cute or as cliche as that may sound, I think, you know, my story is testament to why it is so important for women to think about owning property.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree. I think for everybody, it's something that we need to be thinking about for the future, that we do need something that's going to fund retirement, but equally, you know, we need something for the rainy day. We need something for when things, you know, turn to shit.
That's accurately said.
Yeah. So, Marion, obviously, it's really obvious that your story has inspired the type of work that you're doing today, but let's talk more about that type of work. So, you've become a money coach. I know it's not all about property. And in fact, when I was thinking back today, leading into this, about when you and I started working together, and it was either 2011 or 2012. And that was you re-entering the workforce, wasn't it? And,
Correct.
you know, I remember having this similar conversation that we're having today and learning about your story. And I'm like, oh my God, I can see why you want to do this type of work. So that's, you know, through the horrible situation that you found yourself in and the years of going through family courts, it taught you something that you can actually now help other people with. So it's hard to see it as a gift, but it certainly is in a way for a lot of other women.
No, I feel it absolutely is a gift. And I feel that all of the personal lived experiences I have informed my work and my choice of work. And to speak to what my work is today as a certified money coach and a property mentor and educator is I prepare people to be ready. And I prepare people to have that financial literacy and that financial capability. I prepare people to have the emergency fund. I prepare people to have the income safety buffer. I prepare people to understand their money and their cash flow and to make sure that they're living within their means. So it's all of those things. I also help people, you know, you hear my story, and I think everyone has a story, you know. Everyone beyond the suit and the polished look has a story inside of them. And for many people who come to work with me, there is either a set of limiting beliefs that are preventing them from having the life that they want to have, whether that's the physical body, the level of wealth, the social network, the status. And then there are people that come to me that have absolute conundrums and money blocks that seem unimaginable, but they're real, and they prevent them from having the results that they want with money. And so a lot of the work that I am doing is helping people work through limiting beliefs and limiting mindsets and dealing with money blocks or old money traumas. And that's very much the landscape of a certified money coach.
Okay. So tell me, when somebody first comes to work with you, they've said, look, I need help in one way or another, whether it's because they've just gone through a separation, whether they're, you know, maybe just starting out in their property investment journey. What does a normal working with Marion look like?
Well, it looks like
If
depending
there's
on what
such a
work,
thing.
depending on what work they're doing with me, but if they're coming to me as a pure certified money coach and they want to work with me one-on-one, then it's, you know, let's meet reality where it's at. And I actually have to say this to you, the heaviest lifting that I do is that. And what I mean by that is, you know, the human brain distorts and deletes information all the time for all of us, just to keep us safe. Yeah. And people will often be disassociated from their reality. They'll be like, oh, I'm not that bad off. You know, I'm 35 or I'm 40 and I've got 80K in super. Or they will be completely in denial about their situation. And until we can help people meet reality where it's at, nobody takes action because they don't feel like they actually need to take that action. So that's a big part of the work that I do. And then helping people identify their 3 highest values. And I think you might understand this now that you've become a dad and you've got a daughter. You know, we don't go to work and make money for the point of going to work and make money.
No.
We do these things so that we can live our best life in accordance with what are our highest values, what are most important to us. For me, my highest value is to be a present mother to my only son, not an award-winning mother, a present mother. But being a present mother looks like I want to hang out with him in the morning and get coffee. I want to be around when he's home from school. In order to do that, I need a certain financial position in order to do that. So values work is a big part of the work that I do. And then, as I said to you earlier, getting somebody financially literate and financially capable is a really important part of the work that I do. And I just want to preference that all of the people that I work with are smart, educated, successful people in their own right. You've met some of my clients, they're established in their careers. And like all of us in Australia, we didn't have financial literacy as a subject in school. Primary school.
I don't think I've met anybody who wouldn't deal or wouldn't benefit from going through an experience like this, like myself included.
Yeah, totally. And I think to pull it all together, essentially what I do is, so I've spent, I've shared a little bit about my story, and obviously there's a lot there to unpack, but you can't go through an experience like that and not be touched by it. So I, about 25 years ago, started my journey in personal development and started following people that are in the personal development space and studying behavioral science and psychology so that I could improve myself. And I went on to do, study and certifications and qualifications in those areas. And a lot of the work that I do embeds in that the personal development side and the behavioral science side and the psychology side, because ultimately at the end of the day, how we think determines how we feel and then how we behave, and that in turn determines our results.
Yeah.
And so I think that mindset stuff is really the starting place for anything financial or investment related.
Okay. So do you have some examples of, say, customers, even in a very short time of working with you, that after going through the experience of understanding their values and putting in place all of the, what are they called, safety nets and things, where they've called you and said, thank God I went through this?
I have hundreds of examples, and there's a lot of published reviews of my work, a few hundred. But I can think of a woman who came to me, a single woman, very successful 6-figure earner with a child, so single mother, and was plodding along in life, earning her 6 figures, paying lots of tax, and had an investment property that she had purchased. Unfortunately for her, it happened to be in a flood zone. And unfortunately for her, it wasn't a particularly good investment property. And in fairness to her, she did the best that she could with what she knew. But her trajectory on that path with that particular property, I mean, first of all, it got flooded. It was in a flood zone, so it was water damaged.
Yeah.
And she ended up working with me and going through all of the processes that we just talked about, and then finding the confidence after all of that work to say, okay, I did something and it wasn't actually the best thing I could have done. So I'm going to do something about it and change it. And so she actually sold that property and then went on to buy an established investment property, obviously using a buyer's advocate. And then she went on to buy a second property, which she's currently building. And so the end result for that particular woman is she was able to meet reality where she's at and say, even though I tried my best, it didn't go quite right. I don't have to give up and stop altogether, and that doesn't make property investing bad. So she pressed
Well, that's a big one. Like, if you think about it, people can easily get burnt. I tried this, it didn't work, I'm never trying again. And I can only imagine when
like dating,
you
Tim.
yeah, exactly right. Plenty of errors there. But if you stopped after that first one, what are your other choices? You've got to put a plan in place somehow. If it's not property, it needs to be something else. So I think going through and understanding what's possible first, where you went wrong, and then having the confidence to be able to say, well, listen, I need to do something and I'm going to do it a bit more measured this time.
Yeah. And it's the reframing, Tim, of, okay, and I use the dating analogy and we laugh, but it's not like that you have one bad experience romantically and therefore the entire male species is bad. Yeah. It's, I didn't choose the best one or the most compatible one or the one that matches my values and what I need. And there was a lot of reframing and mindset work, because you lose a lot of confidence. That's a big acquisition. To go and spend $500,000 on a property, to buy it in a flood zone, to get it wrong, it's not going up in value, it doesn't have a good rental return. The comeback from that is not easy. So in the program, we did a lot of coaching, a lot of reframing, a lot of mindset work. And the power in that was that she was able to go again, and knowing but this time she did it differently. And I think that's the point. She was like, what did I do that time? And what can I do this time differently? And the missing piece. And I remember saying to her, listen, this is not a pair of jeans that we're buying that we can take back next week if they don't fit. Yeah. This is a substantial asset. And we need to invest money in the expertise to get it right so that you're not in the same situation again in 36 months.
Yeah. Well, sticking on the subject of property and back onto the topic of the 1%, why do you personally believe that most investors don't get past investment property one and they can't grow a portfolio?
I think there's a few reasons, not just one.
Mhm.
I think the first reason I would say I live by the credo that successful people ask for help and get the support that they need.
Yeah.
And in
What do you call
fact,
it? You build a team before you build your portfolio.
yeah, for sure. And interesting, every client that works with me does this exercise where they self-assess themselves in each area of their life. And what we've found is the common denominator is the areas that we're least successful are usually the areas where we have the less support. So I think there's that. First of all, people are not adequately supported with the area of expertise that they need. And we don't do things that we don't understand, let's be honest. We shy away from doing the things that seem complicated that we don't understand. I think the second factor is mindset. And I think it takes a specific mindset to be able to lean into taking radical self-responsibility that it's on me. No one's coming to rescue me. It's on me to do what I need to do in order to have the life that I want to have. I think the third thing is when people have an experience like the woman that I mentioned, then they just use this blanket mentality of all property is bad and therefore I tried that and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And then I think there are technical reasons as to why people can't get past that initial first property. And it may be the financing around that first property was structured wrongly. Yeah. It may be that they actually bought a lemon and the property, they bought for 400 is still worth 400 5 years later. And so that actually prohibits somebody from doing it again, even if they wish to do it again.
And do you think the mindset also plays into why people might be reluctant to pay for advice?
What do you mean by that? The mindset in relation
Is there
to?
a mindset of somebody saying, I want to do this, but I really don't want to pay somebody to help me with this. I'd rather try it myself again,
1000%. And I tell you the distinction between the clients that come to work with me at the beginning and who they are at the end is very different. A lot of people come to me with, we were raised by our parents and our parents did the best that they could do with what they knew. But bless them all, they instilled in us a lot of fear, a lot of scarcity, a lot of hardship. You've got to work hard for money. Money doesn't grow on trees. So a lot of people come to me with a very scarcity mindset where I don't actually want to spend money. I actually am coming because I want to make money. And as we saw in that example earlier, where somebody chose not to spend money and do it themselves, it cost them way more money. So I think scarcity and abundance mindset, but the distinction I'll say at the end of the program when people work with me in that program, people really understand that everybody needs to be paid for their expertise. If I've got a cavity, I don't try and put a string around my tooth and slam the door. I know you're too young, you've probably seen that in the movies, but our parents did that stuff to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Insane. And they value the expertise and they understand that the expertise is directly linked to the result they will or won't have. So 100%, I think it takes a scarcity mindset not to want to engage professionals and pay professionals. And I would just say to you now, I consider myself a successful businesswoman because I can say that because I've been in business for 10 years. I think the data is that in the first 2 or 3 years, most small businesses fail.
Right,
I'm paying coaches and mentors all the time. Last year, I had a coach and I had a mentor. And people are like, why would someone like you need a coach and a mentor? Because there are still areas of expertise that I don't have in nuanced areas of my life that I want to excel. And I don't want to waste the next 10 years figuring it out, right?
Yeah,
There is somebody that has that expertise that can fast track my success and help me get what it is I need to get to where I want a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what advice would you give to a 25-year-old version of Marion Mays?
Make better dating choices.
I
I have to say that, don't
thought
I?
we might have been walking into that.
Well, I have to own that, don't I? It's completely on me. I take 100% self-responsibility. I would say, obviously I had to sell and liquidate many of my assets. And actually today, in preparation for having a chat with you, I actually looked up each of the properties. I've actually flicked them in a link to you. So when you see them, what I already can understand is, properties that I purchased for 285,000 are now worth 1.8 million. I saw one of them and I was just like,
Yeah.
so I would say, not to sell the assets that you buy, but also in this case, I think we buy assets and those assets are a tool for a lifestyle outcome. And
Yeah.
maybe they're a tool to be able to retire with peace of mind and enough money. Or maybe they're a tool for when we fall on hard times, that is our plan B. It's not another person. It's not mum and dad bailing us out.
Mm,
So that would be the advice that I would give my younger self. Yeah.
very good.
Better dating choices and to not sell the assets that I bought.
Yeah. So, I mean, you probably answered this question a little bit already, but as far as any major mistakes in your property journey, is there, is there a particular property that you go, God, I can't believe I sold that one, or maybe I shouldn't have bought this particular property? Any learnings from your journey that you'd share with our viewers
Yeah.
today?
Well, I think buying two commercial properties as my first properties, which were totally cash flow positive from day one, was a really smart play. And I definitely wish I didn't sell them because they were just incredible cash flow. Tenants took care of all the outgoings. I bought a heritage listed property in Hawthorne for about, I don't know, 300 and something. I can't remember the figure. That property is worth 7 figures today, and it's I sent it to you actually. Its backyard's like a cricket pitch. I definitely wish I didn't sell that, but probably one I wish maybe I didn't buy. In my rebuild, so obviously after all that was over, I got up and I dusted myself off and, had a talk to myself and I said, I'm still responsible for creating the life that I want. And I started rebuying properties. So I'm talking later on.
Yeah.
And one of the properties that I purchased was a new apartment off the plan. And there were a lot of delays with the development of that, unexpected delays. And then once the property settled, there was a lot of issues in relation to some problems in the building and then body corporate fees.
Yeah.
And honestly, like it felt like hard work. And it felt like the returns financially didn't justify the level of hard work having owned other properties. So I would say to people, Tim, know yourself and know your personality and know what you can handle. Do you have a really robust personality that you can handle a lot of stress? Are you good with uncertainty in case body corporate fees are, $3,000 one year and then they go up to $10,000? That happened to me.
Yeah.
In the property that I purchased to live in, when I bought it, the body corporate fees were $2,500 a year. By the time I sold it, the property wasn't managed properly. The sinking fund, the property wasn't upkept.
Yeah.
And we had to end up spending like, I don't know, $1.5 million on the facade of the property. And by the time I sold it, the body corporate fees were $10,000 a year. So
Yeah.
I own the
Wow.
property, but I'm spending $200 a week to live in my own property.
Mhm.
So I think those two stand out for me. But like the story I told you about the woman, I quickly self-corrected. With that property that I bought off the plan, it settled. I ended up selling it in a very short period of time, making a tiny little bit of profit on it. But what I got when I sold it was absolute relief.
Yeah.
And then I had that cash flow
You
to go
can't put a
again.
price on sleeping at night.
No, not at all. And particularly if you don't have a personality type, and certainly I didn't after what I shared with you that I'd been through. I just wanted peace in the world.
Mm.
But selling that enabled me to, I bought a family home and now I live in a really beautiful area in Melbourne, and my son gets to go to a really incredibly, award-winning public school. And again, this is an example of property. He would not have that choice had I not been able to acquire property in this area because the school is very tightly zoned.
Yeah.
And it's just another example of how property can really impact the quality of life that we get to live. So there's a few things there. So there's the two apartments, definitely, one with the body corporate going up and the other one that was just a pain. And I guess moving on from those, you know, being in a position where I've, you know, now got a home in an area that I love.
Yeah. Well, I think a major takeaway from today's discussion, though, is, you know, we know property gives you options. We know that property can be a fantastic way to make money, but I don't think any of that will actually pay off for you in the long run unless you get your mindset right to begin with, and you've got the ability to act on the right advice and all those types of things. So I know obviously that's your specialty. Why don't we finish up today by you telling us a little bit more about how people work with you at Money Strong? So if somebody wanted to reach out and learn a little bit more, what would they do?
Yeah, so there's well, they can go to moneystrong.com.au, the website.
Mhm.
Or unfortunately, you can put my name in Google, Marion Mays, and way too much information comes up,
Yeah.
as I've learned. Yeah, as I've learned.
All good, I hope.
Sorry?
All good though, I hope.
Yeah, it is. I know, but if we go back to that dating analogy I was using, imagine you're going on a first date and someone puts your name in Google and they've already got the download before they get there. Not good.
Yeah.
No suspense, no mystery, no mystique. So I work with people in a couple of ways. I have a 6-week program that relates to your financial mindset. And for a lot of people, they're just scared to even move. And they really have to do the inner work. It's not an outside problem. There's no spreadsheet that will solve it. There's no financial product that will solve it. There's no gun property person. If you have the wrong mindset and the wrong attitude, that's the thing you got to work on first. So I have an incredible 6-week program that gets cut through results. Also have another program in collaboration with the Ladies Finance Club that Tim, you and I hang out on.
Yep.
And that's a buyer get ready program. And I'm really proud of that program because we created that program so the founder of Ladies Buyers Club could buy her own property. So she wanted to create the program that she needed.
Yeah.
And from a pilot, we've had already, it was only a pilot, we took in 20 women, and we've already had 4 people buy a property through going through a 6-week buyer get ready program. That's a really low cost entry point, and it will get your mindset in the place that it needs to be. But practically, it will get you finance ready. It will get you literacy ready, and you will actually be in a position, if you have the means, to buy a property at the end of that program. And then last but not least, my VIP one-on-one program, which is for the people that have a sense of urgency, or they're just done with their circumstances and they want to deep dive quickly. They want tangible results in 90 days. They work with me one-on-one in a private and confidential setting. And so that program is really cut through, and it's like just ripping the Band-Aid off and let's get all of the things done.
Yeah.
And then I say last but not least, I do every year pro bono work and charitable work for not-for-profit organizations, community groups. I'll be hanging out with the Sons of the West, which is an initiative funded by the Western Bulldogs Foundation, doing financial literacy for those guys, which I can't wait for.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, other access points like podcasts like this, where people can listen and hopefully feel motivated, or even like inspired that maybe it's possible for me too, you know,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think
And
I'd like.
look, Marion, I've got no doubt there'll be people that have find themselves in a similar situation now. Maybe they haven't gone through that separation, but it's these things that are holding that back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think everything though, isn't it, in our life that we're not winning at, we're not achieving it, we're not doing it. There's some internal thing with us. There's some internal block. There's some limiting belief. There's some constraint within us. And that's where we've got to do the work. But I think kind of the note for me that I'd love to kind of end on is, you know, I'm a girl that immigrant parents, grew up in the northern suburbs. I'm not anyone special, but at 25, I could buy a commercial property. And at 26, I could buy another commercial property. And, you know, at 27, I could buy a property. So if I can do it, I wasn't born into affluence or wealth. Anyone who's willing to take self-responsibility for the financial life that they want can do it too. And I think the difference is now, Tim, that we have so much information available and we have so much support and help, like a 6-week buyer get ready program, like buyers advocates. We didn't have buyers advocates back then. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I know through a couple of customers that you and I have worked with together, they've come into this thinking that it was impossible. And,
Mhm.
you know, you just don't know what types of loan products are out there. I know you've got access to, you know, private funding and all types of different things. So I do urge anybody who thinks they're on the fence about whether or not they, you know, could do something like this, do reach out to Marion and learn a bit more, because it'll be well worth the exercise.
Thanks, Tim, for
Thanks
saying
so
that.
much. We'll chat again soon. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll talk. We'll
Thanks,
see you on
Tim.
the next one.
See ya.
Bye.